Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to our sixth talk on our Open Science Outreach course that has been organized by Inspire NT. Today we have Dr. Penny Wurm, who works here at Charles Darwin University in the College of Engineering, IT and Environment. And she runs a unit on postgrad level on community engagement. And I think it's a very, very interesting unit. And she's going to give a little bit of a taste of that unit today and a little bit more. So I'm really looking forward to her talk. Thank you, Penny.
Thanks, Carla. I think everyone can hear that sounds like this. It's getting through. Yes, thanks. Yeah, so thank you for the invitation, Carla, and congratulations on this wonderful program too. So I'm very pleased to be invited. Thank you. So I'm focusing on, as Carla said, I actually teach a unit in community engagement for biosecurity and natural resources management. And I thought I would bring that sort of approach to science communication. So my presentation is sort of more about just some thoughts that you might like to consider, and I hope to have a little bit of engage to and fro. I might ask you to give me some ideas at one point, because I was feeling a little bit intimidated coming to a science communication specialist audience, and so I thought, boy, better be on my game today. So I'm looking at community engagement and just go into sort of levels of engagement as part of the theme. So just to introduce myself, it's sort of helpful to know where people fit into things. So I'm a staff member at Charles Darwin University, as Carla said, and I'm a senior lecturer in the environment discipline within the College of Engineering, IT and Environment. And I'm also a researcher. All of the academics in environment have both research and teaching duties, and our research is hosted by the Research Institute for Environment and Livelihoods. So our research work sits very much at the interface of nature and people. I just wanted to sort of introduce my work a little bit. I'm actually trained as an ecologist, so my background, I'd studied science units at school, and I then did a science degree, and then I started work in a science sort of pathway. But now at this stage of my career and life, my work is very much engaged with people. So I have a science background that but I'm using that background in helping solve people's problems, or hopefully solve, or at least even frame questions in a way that's helpful to people. So I have with colleagues, we have a teaching and research practice in Eastern Indonesia. So these photos are taken in the island of Timor, in the Indonesian side of Timor. So this is literally an hour away from where we are. And this is photographs taken on a field intensive, the Eastern Indonesian Field Intensive. We've been working with district government, local universities, 4 universities at one stage, and now it's just the 2 of us, a big public university in Kupang and Charles Darwin Uni. And so staff and students from the 2 unis go to this village where we now have a long-term and really strong relationship with people there. And those photos show us speaking. So this this person here is a CDU student. This is a local student. This is a village elder and guide. And he provides a sort of cultural welcome for us when we arrive in the village with beautiful chanting and ceremony. And there's, I think, just a local person, that might be the house owner, where we're looking at his well. So we're looking at water, management of water resources, irrigation and household water resources. So taking an ecological approach or a systems approach to an agricultural setting. Work involves talking to householders. So he's a CDU student and a student from one of the Indonesian universities, chatting to householders about their experiences of water management in the village there. And in the middle here, we've got students walking along, having to be very sure-footed. We're all clumsy and slipping compared to the local people who can skip in bare feet over this slippery mud. Even elderly people can run across that. We're also trying to balance without falling. And there's a CDU bag there. So they're a group of students being led by someone. We're being guided to some households. We used, in our communication with people there, we used satellite imagery. That was a really useful tool. This is an elderly man and his sister, and he was having trouble seeing the things, so he used my reading glasses to be able to look at the satellite imagery. But the maps were actually a really engaging tool to talk to people when we visited a household. So on that particular trip, we were just interested in looking at household land holdings, the sizes of them and what people grew and how far they were away from their houses and things. So there's some local students from Indonesia, and this was their grandchildren who used to live with them and look after them. So yeah, there's a interesting communication tool. Developing friendly relationships was part of making people feel relaxed. We worked in 3 languages while we're doing this field work, and that meant that and usually in a group of say 40, this year there was a group of 40, this is in one of the trips, there were only 3 people who spoke all 3 languages, and so that meant that there was a point for everyone else, a point where you never quite knew what was going on, because we all spoke at least one of the 3 languages, the local language, Dawan, Indonesian and English. Many people spoke 2 of languages, and there was a few that spoke 3, so that was a good experience. But it actually meant it was a levelling and connecting situation. So we had to communicate slowly, we had to work through translation, everyone had to be patient. It was actually a sort of quite a connecting experience working across those languages. And this was another communication tool. Here we have the head of the village at the time, and we had about 100, we held a slide night to recap on what we'd been doing on that particular field trip, and had explanation, verbal explanation, and then slides. And about 100, I think it was about 120 people came from the village to the 700 households in the village. And so, yeah, came to listen and look at the slides. So that was also really great. There's a lot of to and fro communication throughout the whole fieldwork. So just wanted to, this is just by way of introduction to my experiences in engaging and communicating with people. And the second stream of research that I'm involved in is in the Northern Territory. My colleague Sean Belair's and I are working on commercialising native rice with a local Aboriginal business and the Northern Territory Department of Primary Industries. So this is the grain, and this is it in the wild. So this beautiful grass produces these grains. And just looking at a sort of wild food, a high value, low volume native food product is what we're looking at, that's also culturally identified, ethically produced and things like that. So this is just to explain who people are. These are our colleagues at DPI. We had a day filling up pots for a pot trial that we've just started out there. This is Lorraine Williams. She's a Larrakia woman who worked for Aboriginal bush traders, who at that stage were a body that promoted those sorts of collaborations. So she facilitated that sort of connection. So that was a sort of boundary worker type role, where someone who moves between organisations and knowledge systems to help facilitate some collaboration. And that's Lynette Kenyon and her daughter, who's now a grown woman. We were having a trial of making products and things. So there's Lynette and Graham and I and Sean. The Kenyon family, they run Particle Aboriginal cultural tours, and they're incredibly successful and enterprising tourism business that's been going for about 10 years. And they are interested in diversifying their business into all kinds of things, including bush foods. So wonderful partners for us. And so we're the research partners, and they're a business partner along with DPI. So you can see the amount of communication and sharing of perspectives and knowledges that this any kind of research work involves. And every agency, DPI possibly speak a slightly different language to CDU researchers. Lynette and Graham, they speak a business language and traditional owners. Graham is a senior traditional elder decision maker on Woolner land out on Adelaide River, and Lynette is a gun businesswoman. So there's all these different sorts of perspectives on a problem where we've all got to be able to talk to each other, come up with common goals. So a lot of investment in relationships and understanding each other, as well as sorting out technical problems. So that was just by way of introduction. So as I say, I'm hoping to sort of take a community engagement approach to science communication today. That's what I want to focus on, and I hope it's interesting for you all. And I just wanted to ask, and it's not a trick question, and there's no right or wrong answer. I was just curious to see what you think. I've put some ideas there of what the goals for science communication might be. Does anyone online or in the room just want to, I've put down a science show might be to entertain or excite. You know, sometimes that can be something that you might want to do, or to inform people of something important, to perhaps go further than just informing, to actually educate. But knowledge, yes, to share knowledge, yeah. Help people prioritise, yes, yep. Any other thoughts? Yes. Yep, fantastic, yep. Building people's own capacities to pursue their interests, yeah, or spark interest and then help them follow up themselves. Yeah, great.
Inspiration.
Influence, yes, and inspiration. Oh yes, thanks, someone online. I was wondering where that voice came from. Gave me a fright actually. I thought, yes, inspiration, that's right, to inspire. Yeah, exactly. Hoping that someone will follow something. Yeah. Yep. There might be some chat. Yeah, great, Carla. Do you want to follow that, or we're just checking the chat? Yeah, the rest of the slides have. Aaron, you're scaring us.
Yes, to help village people understand the scientific basis for decision making.
Yes, yes. Thanks, Cam. Yes, thanks, Cami. That's great. Exactly, to help people do things, giving people, supporting people's capacity to understand and even do. Yep, that's great, Carla. You're happy. Yeah, that's fine. Yeah. And most of the rest of the slides are just text, actually. Thanks. Do you want that? I can use the arrows. Yep. Okay.
I will get my phone, so any questions I can actually read.
Lovely. Thanks. That sounds great. Yeah. So now I just wanted to. I think we talked about a lot of things, and some of those are sort of quite deep, and some of them maybe are just catch attention. So I just wanted to really focus for this presentation on really levels of engagement. So this is, I'm just going to go through a few different schemas that visually explain the levels of engagement. So, and I've got a reference list at the end if anyone's interested in reading more. But here's a starting point. So this is from Aslan and Brown. They're both social scientists working for the Department of Commonwealth Department of Agriculture at the time in a policy unit. They're both people with PhDs, but a lot of communication practice and social scientists. And they came up with this schema, which is you might start your engagement at the first level of being informed. So that's sort of a minimum really, is I'm being informed of something. Then being consulted. What would be the difference between informed and consulted, would you suggest?
Informed is being given the information.
Yes.
And consulting is how to go about the solution to the problem.
Yeah. To create an outcome. Yes, great. And it sort of implies sort of two-way as well, doesn't it? To be consulted, you've got to speak to someone, they've got to respond. There's a bit of two-way, whereas informed could be passive. Maybe it's not a bad thing. I mean, that's a fine place to start. And then as you move up, there's becoming involved and participating. So it's more active. People becoming more active in whatever your project is as someone who wants people to engage with you around a science topic. So they've just put a note here, people feel increasing commitment to and ownership of processes and outcomes. So here you could say, oh, that's interesting, okay, and then get on with what you're doing. Here you think, well, that they were asking me, I'm going to see now what's actually they've done with that consultation that they had with me. So it's increasing commitment to and ownership of process and outcomes. And also people increasingly recognise their interests are involved. And they need to ensure their interests are taken into account. So more active, more benefit, and as John said, solutions focused, that kind of thing. Yeah, so that's a starting point. This is a diagram, same topic, from the International Association for Public Participation. And that's a spectrum of public participation. So you can see they've got more categories. The previous one had 3, and this has gone up to now 5 categories. So again, we've got inform, consult, involve, collaborate, up to the word empower. So informing is to provide the public with balanced and objective information. So that's about good quality information, providing to assist them in understanding the problem, alternatives, opportunities and/or solutions. So that's informing. So very important work. I mean, that's all critical, isn't it? It's not a small thing. Then consult, we've discussed, providing to obtain feedback and analysis, alternatives or decisions from the public. Involve, to work directly with the public throughout a process that the public concerns and aspirations are consistently understood and considered. So that's quite a leap, and effort has to go into ensuring that that can happen. Collaborate, to partner with the public in each aspect of the decision, including the development of alternatives and the identification of a preferred solution, so very much shared. And then finally, to place final decision-making in the hands of the public. Now, that doesn't mean the public has to be, that we can unpack that. It doesn't mean people saying, yes, do whatever you want. It's actually starting here and building this partnership so that the public actually is helping with decision-making. Or your partners or whoever will use the public, because that's what this organisation's name. And then they're saying, in order to do that, there's a promise to the public, which is, we'll keep you informed. There's an implicit promise in starting this process with people. Next, we'll keep you informed, listen to, acknowledge and provide feedback on how public input has influenced the decision. We'll work with you to ensure that your concerns and aspirations are directly reflected in the alternatives developed and provide feedback on how public input influenced the decision. We'll look to you now at collaborate. We'll look to you. So there's this partnership in formulating solutions. Now it may be that the public he will implement what you decide. So it may be that doesn't necessarily mean that the public has become the technical expert, but the public will know what might work in their community. We discussed an example the other day looking at a program that involved wild dog management in a peri-urban area. So there was quite an empowered process there, just referring to a class we had the other day. So shooting dogs around suburban areas is not a very popular thing to do. Quite in a rural area, much more acceptable. People are used to working with animals, killing animals. That's a sort of something familiar. With a peri-urban situation, dogs are your pets. They're not an animal that needs to be managed or used. So in that case, the people who were implementing this dog management program actually found out what was acceptable to the community, and baiting and poisoning was not acceptable. But there were a lot of other management strategies that could be used, and so they were prioritised. And it may be that eventually people would accept baiting and poisoning. But this was an example of where, by consulting with the public, involving them, collaborating, and then finally realised, well, that's just not acceptable. So we won't start with that particular option. We'll keep discussing it, but out of respect for the community's opinions, I'm not sure if I've jumped around a bit too much there, but it's just an example of where, as a scientist, you can actually work in a mutual and shared and empowering situation for that community. And as a result of that, there would be a lot of trust the next time you go and talk to that community about some problem. So just to talk about that word empowerment. So empowerment increases the ability of the individual to predict, control, and participate in society. So I think, Erica, you mentioned something that sounded like empowerment to me, where you want, what did you mention? I've just forgotten.
I mentioned influence.
Influence, yeah, influence, and there was something else too, yes. Oh, I know, and sorry, I've forgotten your name. Tom. Tom's talked about so people can continue on their own path to further investigate too. So that's an empowering thing where people know how to, so participate in society. Another definition, I got all of these from Jen Toff. You might be interested, if you're interested in this type of topic, you might want to read that. A process through which people become strong enough to participate within, share in the control of, and influence events and institutions affecting their lives. And then the third useful definition is empowerment is a process, a mechanism by which people, organisations and communities gain mastery over their affairs. Yeah, so that's what I look for when I'm being communicated to by people with technical knowledge or, you know, seeking my opinion on things. Yeah. Now I meant to say too, I'll just head back one actually. Empowerment is, this sort of thinking is actually came about in the 60s and 70s in sort of liberation education, and there's some South American thinkers, and it came into sort of, you know, empowering peasant classes and working classes. So it sort of focused on liberation from class structures around the 60s and 70s. And you can see some of those references are in the 80s, you know, quite old, but still very powerful. Jen Toff has quoted other people there. But the sort of way that empowerment's thought of has sort of changed, and more recently, so originally it was about the intrinsic value of empowerment, like human rights, civil rights, people's liberty. Whereas now it's more thought of in terms of instrumental benefits. So for example, I want to control dogs because they're dangerous to people, wild dogs I'm talking about, and it's destructive to animals. And if I can, sorry, I'm jumping around in terms of mapping from empowerment to the instrumental benefits, but if people are actually empowered, there are benefits to that empowerment. It's not just about people's rights to know and things. It's actually a better functioning society with an educated, empowered community that can contribute to whatever it is you're trying to do. So that the way empowerment's thought of has sort of shifted over time. So now back to this, just to refresh those terms. This is now a very recent source. I was fortunate to sit in on a presentation by Jenny House, who's a PhD student in Real, and her focus on her PhD is about empowerment of women in fishing communities in Timor-Leste. And this is one of the sources I learnt from her presentation. And this is another framing of empowerment, and it's using the terms, it's called the REBET, because it's an acronym RBEM. Reach, benefit, empower and transform. So it's even going further than empowering, it's looking at changing norms. And in this case, it's talking about women's participation in fisheries, so it's expressed in those terms. Reach women and men as participants. Benefit is to deliver access to resources and benefits to women and men. Empower, strengthen the ability of women and men to make strategic choices. And a lot of empowerment is about having choices. That's another definition that is implicit in the word empowerment. And then the final stage of this spectrum of engagement is to actually change gender norms in this particular thinking, which is around gender and where it's come from gender and gender participation in fisheries. And the note that Clibera made is that one approach will not automatically lead to the other. So just reaching people would not automatically lead to benefiting both genders. So there's work involved in achieving those different levels. So that's all I wanted to say on that. Hope that's sparked some interest or curiosity about that, and thinking about how, as educated people working with community or colleagues, how we can have that as a bit of a vision for what we're trying to do, and that we look for that ourselves when we're taking part in a process. So that's that theme, and this is sort of indirectly related. I just found this the other day actually while I was preparing for a class, and it's just this fantastic communication tool. I think it's actually empowering because it's so clear, and it's, I'm not sure if you've come across it, but Darwin Harbour, so I'm not sure if everyone's from Darwin who's listening or not, but we're on a large harbour, so it's worth having a look on Google Earth to see where it is. And I remember years ago, when I first moved to Darwin 30 years ago, there was a little bit of confusion around the values of the harbour. Some people wanting to build marinas, some people were thinking, oh, well, we've just got to clear mangroves, that's just part of development. Other people saying, well, no, shouldn't be clearing. So there's a lot of that sort of discussion. And since then, I haven't really been engaged in the process at all personally since. And now there's this report card system since 2009, where the public can click on this link. So I'm hoping that by clicking on that link, I can sort of show you what's happening on the screen. Oh, the view, yes, okay. So I'll change the screen sharing, that's fine, yeah. So I'm just clicking on the link, and I've got to change from you, stop share, yep. And then share screen. And I've gone to Darwin Harbour report cards here, yep, and share that. See, how easy is that? How good's that? Yeah. So now, just drag it. Yeah. So it's actually all the information's on this side of the screen, so I think we'll be okay. So this is about managing a harbour. It's about technical information. It's about water quality, not things that people have in their everyday knowledge necessarily. There'll be people that are interested in it because they fish, they use the harbour. There's a lot of stakeholders in the harbour. There's all kinds of people that have a vested interest, have a strong interest and entitlement to have a say in how the harbour's managed. So now this report card system's been introduced. It's just this wonderful, so it's not a topic that everyone's going to say, oh yes, water quality, that's one of my hobbies. It's sort of actually, but the information, the way it's presented. So I've just clicked on that particular report card. And so it just gives a little paragraph to explain, not a lot of text, just a small amount of information, just the right amount of information. And then you scroll down, there's a little map of Darwin Harbour, and then it's got this really clear zoning. So, and also it's summarised information so you can actually say, oh look, it's actually travelling quite well. We've got mainly A's, but hold on, we've got 2 problematic zones there. So if we click on, let's click on, so the legend is excellent right through to very poor with those coloured letters. And then we've got the different zones, and that's their little letter bubble is sort of sitting over the top of that zone. So let's have a look at this one, Buffalo Creek, that's zone 8, to see why is that poor when everywhere else in Darwin Harbour is excellent. So if you click on that, there's a lovely little graphic that comes up. So there, it's a little bit of an amplified map, so we can see where it is. And here's a great little diagram. And so it's showing you that dissolved oxygen levels are good, algae levels are bad, water clarity is bad, and nutrient levels are high. What does all that mean? So you scroll down and it explains. Buffalo Creek is a small tidal creek that drains into Shoal Bay. It receives discharge from a waste treatment plant, so a sewage farm. So obviously that explains quite a lot. The creek is poorly flushed and discharge is not readily dispersed. Bit of jargon there that perhaps could have been expressed a little bit more simply, but you could look up those 2 words perhaps, causing a build-up of nutrients and excessive algal growth. So then when you go back to that diagram, you can see, oh yeah, okay, nutrients too high, that means algae's too high. So it's sort of explaining that. So just by a few clicks, you get a picture of what's a really sort of complex topic. And then on top of that, I'm just going to have to move. I think I can just go like that. Is that right colour? Yeah, there we are. Yeah, so then you think, okay, well, that's 2019. How's it travelling overall? And here's a little thing to show that often it's worse and actually we're okay at the moment. What's happened there? So then you might be interested in seeing since 2009, there's been many years where it's been E, which I can't remember what it actually means, but bad. And now it's just sort of, for the last couple of years, it's improved. So I know there are researchers at CDU working with the ponds and trying to improve their sort of how they work. And then there's underneath that a data summary. So if you're actually interested in reading a little bit more, the distribution of the data for all parameters, okay, there's a bit of jargon in there, is shown here as box and whisker plots. So then it explains what box and whisker plots. And then the report card grade, for the report card, the median of the data, the solid line, is compared to the water quality objective, the dotted line. So we can see here that turbidity, and there is an explanation of what turbidity is elsewhere in the thing. It explains, you know, what turbidity is and the fact that that's high. So I just thought that was a really, I'm not sure what you're thinking, but I just thought that was such a clear explanation. What do you think about that? Do you think it's a useful, good communication tool? Science communication? Yeah.
I don't know if everybody would understand the bar chart.
No, that's right. The bar charts are box and whisker a bit yucky looking, but you can see, oh, well, there's a line and it's above it. It's over. It's visually, it's not text. But yes, you're right. So maybe the first step where you get that little colour card, colour wheel, that might help. And even, you know, these other terms too, some people would just not be interested or useful. So a certain level of confidence is required. But what do you think about these little ones? Like this. Do you think that helps explain with a little text underneath? That could be your first step into it. Yeah. So now, if you're wanting more, you go back, if they're the report cards, if you actually want more information, there's all these more detailed reports that a person with some formal qualifications would be interested in. So this water quality protection plan, there's some terrific, journal articles and things there, including policy articles. The thing I liked about this publication list was it's really multidisciplinary. It's got policy, really fascinating, how to use policy instruments to change behaviour. There's a plan, so if people want to know more. So it's a bit of a jump between this level of information and the report cards, but the report cards are a sort of, I just thought the way that was set up has been quite well thought through. Yes, John.
Ask the presentation.
Yes.
Yes, because from like the part that one you showed, yes, that would be good to see.
Yes.
But coming from my country, someone would immediately look at it and think, oh, this is for children.
It's for children, yes.
Can you repeat what the question is?
I can. I'll repeat the question, John. All right, I might let you continue on. Sorry.
I would like to put, how would you look about presentation? Because when you showed us the bar chart, yes, it's big, it's concise, it's simple to learn. But in my country, it's a different type of mentality. You'd find an adult would look at it and think, this is for children. You're not, I can't take you seriously with this.
Yeah.
So would you have to look into the population and how you think might be the presentation of the perception of the population?
So thanks. Oh, yes, that sounds good. Yes, thanks. Thank you. So the population, so some people might think that's childish. Yeah, just the colours and the graphic. Yeah, I felt relieved when I saw that.
I think information should be kept as simple as possible, because it can be accessed through any age group. It will be easier. So like the more simplistic the information, like the better quality, I think, I guess.
Maybe as an entry point. Yeah. Like there's plenty of detailed information there in other areas of that website. And I know I know, because I'm obviously trained to know how to look for that, but maybe I'll just hold it.
I'm just looking at it from a point of view, because even when during my primary school days, they were not as colorful in terms of presentation. They were put a point, they gave us the knowledge, and that's how I'd say the whole country, at least the community that is educated, sees things. So if they were to see like many colors and everything, they'll think you're trying to talk to children, and immediately their intrigue would go up. They would have they don't have any form of I would say
Credibility.
They would question the credibility of the information.
And which country are you talking about, John?
Zambia.
Zambia, okay, yes. So maybe for an Australian public, we think, hold on, I want that in a way I can understand, thanks very much. So we've already asked for that kind of thing. And so therefore maybe now whereas in Zambia, no, you'd have to take a different approach or use, So you'd need to, it's not going to just appeal to everyone.
I think it's also a little bit the public you're aiming for. It might be that, for example, if you're aiming for that part of the society in any country, and I'm thinking here Brazil, as I speak, where I come from, that's that part of the society who went to university, and then it might find that something like that could be a little bit condescending. But at the same time, we have that part of the society that, only barely did primary school, like luckily ended up high school, and nothing higher than that they will be able to understand. And then it depends on who you're targeting. If my target audience is the university level people, then it might not reach it. But if your target audience is the people who didn't quite get there, that kind of information might be what we need. So, and it's all the question. So who are we targeting here?
Yes, that's right. Who are you targeting? Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah, I might be totally the wrong person to evaluate that website. I tested it out with some first year science students the other day, and they thought it was really good. They enjoyed it and they used it, and then they went to the other reports to go further. So that might be, it's targeted at a reasonably educated person perhaps, who'd even be worried about water quality in the first place.
Yeah, and I think here in Australia, people do like visual and easy to understand. But I don't think this is, for example, when I was saying condescending, it's just the mindset of the certain type of people in a society could think. But I don't think this is. I think this is great, and it's that thing. It's one view. I understand it. That's great, and I think that for the target audience that they wanted here, which is, you know, anybody.
A voter? A voter?
A voter. Yeah, so it's just like the average of the society. I think they did a pretty good job. Yeah.
Yeah, but no, not saying you're wrong either, John. No, there's no such thing as wrong or right. You have to ask people what they think. And if they say, oh, that's hideous, and I didn't even look past that, then, okay, you've not reached those people, so you need to create another communication tool.
It was a very good point.
Yeah, it was a very good point. Erica, I'll just hold this if you don't mind speaking into it, and it saves.
I was just going to say, like, I guess tying it back to what we've been talking about today, the accessibility is a really important part of the empowerment process. Making sure anyone can, who, you know, logs on, jumps on the internet, can begin the learning process and engage further if they want to.
Yeah, great. Thanks, Erica. Top marks. I was just going to wrap up by saying that, link it back to now, why am I talking about this stupid little graphic? But exactly, the thing that caused a link in my mind was it's potentially empowering because people can access it, see how it's tracked, and so it's sort of feel confident that there's people. Actually, one of the students in the class where we had a look at that, they said, oh, thank goodness this work's being done. You know, they felt more trusting of the public, the government, because they were so pleased to see that this, it's not like it's secretly all terrible and all the water quality stuff's hidden. It's actually up there. So that sort of boosted confidence. Sorry, I've overtalked your point into another point, but yes, you're right. That's why this seemed a suitable example because of that. Any other questions online or comments? Happy for them if you... No, looks like it.
Yeah, there is a question in the chat. Whatever communication may be authentic, specific, as long as it's easy to understand.
Yeah, that's great.
And that's from Kamal.
Yes, thanks, Kamal. Authentic, that's an important word.
No, audience, sorry, audience specific. Sorry,
audience
that was me
specific,
saying.
Right, yes.
So whatever communication must be audience specific, as long as it's easy to understand.
Yes, yes, that's right. Yep.
Well, if we don't have any more questions, oh, you have one, John?
Yeah, leading up to, from what you said earlier in the talk, you said you start with inform the public, then consult, then engage. Yeah, with consulting, does that mean that we are the ones providing a potential solution to the situation, or you're just saying, just giving out the possibilities to the public?
Yeah, that's right. So that has to be, I mean, I've just mentioned the words without really going into details, but yeah, what does that really mean for farmers, oh, sorry, for public to be empowered? What does that really mean? So, for example, an example where I first came across these ideas was in rural farming situations like the ones I showed in the first studies that I was involved in. And there the farmers are just waiting for information to come to them. Sometimes it comes, sometimes it doesn't. Sometimes they hear that there's an extension officer come, sometimes there isn't. Whereas another model, which is where farmers are actually driving the whole process of extension services. So they've got a problem, they're deciding, it's a farmer-led extension. So I'm not sure if this is a good example, but it's one that is in the forefront of my mind. So farmer extension services that are farmer-driven instead of top-down. So it doesn't mean that farmers all, well, some elements of it are presuming that people have some knowledge already about what's in their lives. That's the first step. So you are the expert in your life, John. I'm the expert in my life. So that's a starting point then for, okay, what can I bring to this situation that's involving my community? So that's sort of where the decision making comes in. It's not saying that you're an expert in whatever the problem is, but you're an expert in your life and your community and how your community and life will contribute to solving this problem. Does that make sense? Not quite?
Well, I asked the question because
yes, you had a reason behind the question.
yeah, because when I was I'd say earlier on, people always talk about this fracking problem.
Yes.
And I talked to my lecturer and said I may have a way that could help a possible solution. And she told me she told me that that's not our job. We are just supposed to get the data and inform them. That's it. So
I disagree with that person, I think.
I just came to, then I talked about the idea to someone else and they said that's engineering. So when you came up and when you said, I understand in the information part,
yep.
we the scientists would get the data and inform the public.
Yep.
But then when you came to consult and offer in a way of like offering a solution, it confused me because I was under the impression that that's not our job. We're just there to get the data.
Well, that's a personal decision, I suppose, how far you become involved in problems, and also maybe that brings up the issue of roles that you have in a particular moment. So if you're being employed as a government staff member, for example, there's a lot of regulations around what you can actually say on behalf of the government and what your job as a government officer is. But as a private citizen, you can operate in a different way because your behaviour then isn't regulated other than by laws and regulations that we're all. So I think being clear about your role and when it's appropriate for you to intervene. And so I have some personal role ideas about fracking and some personal thoughts about fracking, and I can speak about them, but I'm not an expert in fracking. So I don't feel I wouldn't think to speak on behalf of CDU about fracking. I might speak on behalf of CDU about the commercial potential of native rice because I have some background in that. I've got done some experiments. I've got some actual personal, professional involvement and published some things about that. So I could comment on that, but I couldn't comment on fracking because I'm not but as a citizen, I've got some very strong ideas. So does that help you?
That's because I think the fracking was a bit like with the rice thing. Like, yep. Yes, you say you're an expert in it. You have done the research.
Yeah, I have something to say. Yes, yeah.
But from that point of view, I was under the impression that that's it. We just tell the farmers this is what we know, or the stakeholders this is what we know. You do not provide any, and that's it.
I see. Well, you could choose to work that way. I would like to work in a project where there's much more relationship and mutuality involved. So the projects that we and my colleagues and I, we have a vision of that more. We're empowered through our learning from the perspective of an Aboriginal enterprise. We're empowered from what the DPI as a government agency is trying to achieve in Aboriginal economic development. And then we bring something to that three-way discussion. So I think it's up to you to decide what sort of work you want to do. Yeah, hope that answers your question.
That's actually bringing me some very, very old memories of undergrad when where I was doing my undergrad in Minas Gerais, Brazil. People used to say exactly the same thing, John.
Really?
And I think it's a part of your, like you grow as a researcher, realize that there is more to than just collecting data and putting that on tables. And I think that became clear to me when I was in Papua New Guinea doing a research with pig nose turtle. And it was very clear that I could just put in figures and graphs that the pig nose turtle was declining, but that wouldn't have been enough. So it was my personal choice to keep trying to do community engagement and keep working on that. And then became almost like most of my career, it's on that area now. And there is pathways to that. If you want, that's what it really interests you as a scientist and a researcher. And there is other pathways when you become as more technical work, then you can just provide the data. And then someone else will translate it, which is science communicators like we have last week with Jane. for example, she helps a lot on that area when researchers come with their information, and then she helps them to put that in a language that everybody can understand, or in figures that people can understand. So it's really it's a personal choice on which
Where you
area
want to
you
work.
like to go.
Yes.
Yeah.
But I think it's not a personal choice, that there needs to be that communicate. Like, we're paid with public money to do that work. We are obliged to tell the public. Now, maybe the public's not interested. Maybe I'm not very good at communicating, so someone else needs to, I need to talk to a professional communicator, and they can help me come up with a strategy. But even within the project, I have to be good at explaining my position to the other partners, and they're good at explaining their position, so that my research is relevant to their needs. You know, if I just go off on some tangent and it's, you know, irrelevant, then I'm wasting public money, actually.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. That there is an age of when a researcher could just be in their little dome and do things there and just communicate between their own fellow researchers. I think it's gone. That's not going to happen anymore. And then more and more, your generation and the next generation will have to be better and better at communicating that to different stakeholders, not just the public, but the government, industry partners, and the community.
I also, John, thanks so much for your comment and question, because it's just raised all these interesting points. But just another thing I thought, and you don't have to answer, but I would imagine that was a very disempowering thing for someone to say to you. Like, I couldn't imagine saying to a student, no, you don't need to be worried about that.
No, that's the idea.
Hey?
No, I scrapped the idea.
You scrapped the idea. Yes, yes. So that's, you were just cut off. Yeah. So whereas I think you say, gee, that's interesting. How about you look at that? Or why don't you? Yeah, I would just always encourage student interest. So yeah, I'm sort of shocked that, yes, and you would just drop the idea because you feel, oh, there's no support for it. Yeah.
Think
we're over time.
Oh, yeah, no, that's okay. We still have 4 minutes, but I just to clarify, that was not Kamal, that was Cami.
Oh, Cami.
Cami,
Yes.
sorry.
Yes, I thought it was Cami Melvani.
Yeah. So I was. No, I think that was a very interesting talk, Penny. Thank you very much, and I think it also led to some very interesting questions and sharing of information that, and it was really, really good to have that, the ideas of level of science communication and community engagement here today. And it's an awesome example. Thank you so much. So everybody, next week, actually, thank you.
No, it's a pleasure. Thanks very much for coming, and thanks